A single tap on the window pierced the desert's dead silence. It wasn't a knock, too sharp, too deliberate, like a finger probing my courage. I was alone in a remote Arizona Airbnb, miles from any help, prepping for a job interview that could change my life. But that tap at 9 p.m. wasn't the wind or a stray bug. It was a warning. My heart thudded as I stared into the pitch-black void outside, my reflection trembling in the glass. I didn't see anyone, just darkness. Was someone out there, watching, or was the desert itself alive? One thing was clear. I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. My name's Matt, a 30-year-old tech worker gunning for a promotion in Phoenix. I booked a remote Airbnb in Arizona for a job interview, lured by its rock-bottom price, half what any hotel charged. The listing promised a simple adobe house off a secluded dirt road, with a backyard sprawling into endless dunes. Perfect for a 3-day work trip, I figured. I rolled up Monday evening, lugging my laptop to prep for my Tuesday interview. The house was bare bones, creaky wooden floors, sparse furniture, and a faint, musty smell that clung to the air. Functional, but not exactly cozy. Still, I had work to do, so I brushed off the eerie vibe. That first night, I camped out in the living room, digging into company research. The desert's quiet was unnerving. No cars, no neighbors, just a heavy stillness that pressed against my eardrums. I tried to focus, but the isolation gnawed at me. When that tap at the window hit, my head snapped left. I looked out the window. Nothing, just sand and shadows. I grabbed my phone's flashlight, hesitating. Was I tough enough to check? I crept to the glass, pulse hammering. Nothing but the desert's blank stare. Maybe a beetle, I told myself. Arizona's crawling with them. But my gut screamed otherwise. I double-checked every lock, trying to shake the dread. The house felt too big, too exposed, its walls too thin to keep out whatever was out there. I didn't know it then, but that tap was the opening note of a nightmare that would unravel me. Tuesday morning, I shoved the tap to the back of my mind. My interview was hours away, and I needed to bring my A game. I nailed the questions, walking out of the office buzzing with confidence. To celebrate, I explored the nearby town, grabbing tacos at a sun-bleached diner and cruising past strip malls that looked stuck in the 80s. But even in daylight, the desert felt heavy, like unseen. Eyes were tracking me. Back at the house, I sprawled in the backyard, letting the sun warm my face. For a moment, I relaxed, the tension easing. Then a chill hit. Not from the breeze, but from that nagging sense of being watched, like the desert itself was sizing me up. That night I fired up Netflix, hoping Breaking Bad would drown out my nerves. Around 10 p.m. it struck again. A single tap at the window, sharper, like someone was toying with me. My stomach plummeted. No way this was a bug. I froze, eyes glued to the glass waiting for movement. Nothing. Just that suffocating black void. I grabbed a kitchen knife, hands shaky, and checked every window, every door, all locked. I rushed to the window but saw no one. My heart pounded as I stepped onto the back porch, the desert air biting my skin. Then a new sound. A click like a tongue snapping against teeth, echoing from the dunes beyond the house's dim glow. I yelled, "Who's out there?" My voice cracked, swallowed by the vastness. Another click, closer now. I gripped the knife, tighter, scanning the shadows with my flashlight. Was it a coyote? A local punk messing with me, or something worse? I retreated inside, shoving a chair against the door. The house felt like a cage, its walls too flimsy to protect me. I checked the Airbnb app, but the host, some guy named Carl, had a bare profile. No reviews, just a grainy photo that could have been anyone. No answers, just questions piling up. Every creak of the floorboard sent my pulse spiking. Sleep was out of the question, not after that click. What was out there? and why did it feel so deliberate? By Wednesday, I was fraying at the edges. The taps and clicks had me paranoid, jumping at every sound the house made. I tried to work on my laptop, but my eyes kept darting to the windows, half expecting a face to appear. The desert felt alive, its silence pressing in like a living thing. That evening, I forced myself outside, desperate to prove I wasn't losing. The air was frigid, the sky choked with clouds hiding the stars. My flashlight trembled as I swept it across the backyard. Then I saw him, a stranger lurking in the desert behind the house, barely visible at the edge of the light. He stood, motionless, cloaked in black, his face a smudge in the dark. My breath caught in my throat. This was no mirage. "Hey, you're on private property," I shouted, voice shaking. "I'm calling the cops." He didn't move at first. Then with eerie speed, he eerily quickly walked away, melting into the shadows. I blinked and he was gone like he'd never been there. My legs wobbled as I backed toward the house, knife still in hand. Was he the host, checking the property? A squatter? My mind churned with possibilities, none of them good. Inside, I piled furniture against the doors, hands trembling. The house was no safe haven. It was a trap, exposed on all sides. I dialed Carl's number, but it went straight to voicemail. His profile offered nothing. No history, no clues. Desperate, I scoured the internet for anything about the house. A local news site mentioned petty break-ins in the area, but nothing tied directly to this address. The lack of information was worse than a clear threat. It left my imagination running wild. Who was that man? Why was he here? I stayed up, clutching the knife, every sound amplifying my fear. The desert silence was louder than any scream, a reminder of how alone I was. I didn't know it then, but the worst moment was still ahead, a moment that would make me question everything. Was I truly alone in this house, or had I never been? Thursday night, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept in days, my eyes bloodshot and burning from staring at the ceiling. I tried watching Breaking Bad again, but the show's tension only mirrored my own, twisting my nerves tighter. Around 11 p.m., I shut my laptop and killed the light, plunging the bedroom into darkness. The house's silence was suffocating, pressing against me like a physical weight. I lay in bed, every nerve raw, listening to the quiet. Then it came, a click sound from inside the closet, muffled but unmistakable, like something or someone shifted in the dark. My heart stopped. The closet door was ajar, a thin sliver of black within staring back at me. Another click, louder, like a deliberate signal. I bolted upright, fumbling for my phone with shaking hands. My mind screamed to run, and I listened. In my PJs, I sprinted to my car, barefoot, the gravel slicing into my feet. I locked myself inside, hands trembling as I dialed 911. I sat in the driveway, staring at the house, half expecting that stranger to step out of the shadows. I spoke to the dispatcher, my voice cracking as I explained the noise, the closet, the fear. Police arrived within minutes, their flashlights cutting through the dark. We searched the house together. Nothing. No one in the closet, no signs of a break-in. My stuff was untouched, exactly where I'd left it. But I was done. I packed and fled to a hotel, my mind spinning with questions. Who made that sound? How did they get in? At the hotel, safe behind a deadbolt, I contacted Airbnb. They were useless, offering only a partial refund and vague apologies. Carl finally replied, claiming he was out of town. His voice was flat, almost rehearsed, like he'd fielded calls like this before. I suspected he had a key. No forced entry meant someone had access. I pressed him for answers, but he dodged every question, his tone too calm for comfort. The police report was no help either. noting only that the house was old, with quirks. Quirks? That click wasn't a quirk, it was deliberate, targeted. I kept replaying it in my head, the sound burrowing into me. Was someone hiding in that closet, watching me sleep? The thought clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. I'd escaped, but I didn't feel safe. Not then and not for a long time after. Friday morning, I drove back to Phoenix, rattled but alive. I got the job, but the victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the dread that house had burned into me. I kept digging, desperate for closure. I called Airbnb again, but they stonewalled, refusing to share details about Carl or the property. A week later, Carl's profile was gone, deleted without a trace. I searched for other guests online, finding one review from a guy who'd stayed months earlier. He mentioned strange noises at night and cut his trip short. No specifics, but it was too close to my experience to dismiss. What was wrong with that house? Why did it feel like a magnet for fear? I contacted the local sheriff's office asking about the property. They confirmed it was old, frequently rented, with no major incidents on record. But the deputy hesitated, adding, "Folks out there keep to themselves." It wasn't much, but it fueled my paranoia. Was Carl involved? Or was it a local, slipping with a spare key? The lack of forced entry gnawed at me. Someone had access and I'd never know who. I started checking my locks obsessively, jumping at every creak in my apartment. That click haunted my dreams, a reminder of how close I'd come to what? I didn't know, and that was the worst part. Months later, I stumbled across a news BL in a local paper. A hiker reported odd activity near that dirt road. Flickering. Lights at night. Shadows moving in the dunes. No investigation followed, just a brief mention buried in the archives. It could have been nothing, but to me, it was validation. That house wasn't right. Something about it, Carl, the stranger, the closet, felt alive with malice. If you're ever tempted by a cheap Airbnb in the middle of nowhere, think twice. Some deals come with a cost you can't refund, and some sounds, like that click, stay with you forever, echoing in the dark. It's 1 a.m. in a quiet Georgia town, and a haunting melody slices through the darkness. Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf echoes outside, its cheerful notes twisted into something sinister, like a child's laugh gone wrong. Cheryl and David, newlyweds in their new house in Was, freeze in bed. This isn't a radio. It's coming from their yard, loud enough to rattle the windows. David's hand grips Cheryl's, his pulse racing. "What the hell is that?" he whispers. Cheryl's eyes dart to the curtains, her breath shallow. They'd waited years for this home, their fresh start. Now, something out there is watching, playing a song that feels like a threat. Who's doing this? And why? One thing's clear. This night will change them forever. Would you dare look outside? The music stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving an oppressive silence. Cheryl, a graphic designer who'd spent months sketching their dream home, couldn't sleep. They'd moved to Was, Georgia for a fresh start after years of city life. David, a high school coach with a practical streak, checked every door and window, his flashlight cutting through the dark. "Probably some prankster," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. The couple had poured their savings into this house, a charming two-story with a wraparound porch. Now, every shadow felt like a threat. Cheryl clutched her phone, debating whether to call 911, but David shook his head. "No proof yet," he said. Still, they left the porch light on, its weak glow barely reaching the yard. The next morning, they tried to shake it off. Cheryl brewed coffee, her hands unsteady, while David mowed the lawn, scanning the street for anything unusual. Was was a sleepy town, the kind where neighbors waved and kids rode bikes until dusk. But the memory of that music lingered, sharp and unsettling. Cheryl noticed a patch of trampled grass near the porch, as if someone had stood there for hours. "Look at this," she said, pointing. David crouched down, frowning. "Could be animals," he said, but his eyes lingered on the spot. They decided to ask their neighbor, Mrs. Hargrove, a retired librarian with a knack for town gossip. "Heard any loud music last night?" Cheryl asked casually. Mrs. Hargrove's smile faded. "Was is quiet. Maybe too quiet," she said, glancing at their yard. Her vague answer left Cheryl uneasy, but she didn't press. That afternoon, David checked the yard again, finding nothing but a single muddy scuff mark on the porch steps. "Kids, maybe," he said, scrubbing it clean. Cheryl wasn't convinced. She kept replaying the song in her head, its melody looping like a warning. They agreed to stay vigilant, locking every window and keeping a baseball bat by the bed. As night fell, the house felt smaller, its walls closing in. Cheryl tried to distract herself with a book, but every creak made her jump. David sat by the window, staring into the dark, his jaw tight. At 2 a.m., it happened again. "Tiptoe Through the Tulips" blasted outside, its falsetto voice dripping with mockery, sharp enough to pierce the silence. Cheryl's heart pounded as she scrambled to the window. There on the lawn, a figure stood, staring at the house. It was tall, motionless, its face hidden in shadow, like a statue carved from the night. David grabbed the bat, his knuckles white. "Stay here," he said, his voice low. Cheryl clutched his arm, her nails digging in. "Don't go out there," she hissed, her eyes locked on the figure. It didn't move, even as "Tiptoe Through the Tulips" looped, growing louder, taunting. The couple stood frozen, their breaths shallow, watching the figure through the blinds. Stillness was unnatural, as if it knew they were watching. David's hand hovered over his phone, but he hesitated. "What if it's just a drunk kid?" he whispered, trying to convince himself. Cheryl shook her head, tears welling. "That's not a kid." After what felt like hours, the figure stepped back, blending into the darkness. The music cut off abruptly, leaving a ringing silence. Cheryl collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. David locked the door again, his hands shaking. "We're calling the cops," he said finally. David dialed 911, his voice unsteady as he described the intruder. "There's someone in our yard playing creepy music," he told the dispatcher. She promised a patrol car, but Wass's small police force was miles away, handling another call. While they waited, Cheryl paced the living room, her mind racing. She noticed something outside, a single muddy boot print in the grass, too large for either of them. "David, look," she said, pointing. He shone his flashlight through the window, his face paling. "That wasn't there this morning," he muttered. The print was deep, deliberate, as if someone had stood there watching. Cheryl's stomach churned. "Who's doing this?" she whispered. David didn't answer, his eyes scanning the yard for movement. Desperate for answers, they searched the house, checking the attic, basement, and garage. In the garage, Cheryl found an old, dusty speaker tucked behind a box, its wires frayed but intact. "Could this have played the music?" she asked, holding it up. David shook his head. "It's not even plugged in." Still, they brought. "Get inside," locking the garage door. The couple sat on the couch, bat in hand, jumping at every sound. At 3 a.m., a faint hum started, like static coming from the kitchen. Cheryl's blood ran cold. The speaker, now on the counter, was silent, but the hum grew louder, morphing into "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf?" David grabbed the speaker, ripping its wires apart, but the music didn't stop. It was outside again, fainter but unmistakable, drifting from the yard. Cheryl covered her ears, her voice breaking. "Make it stop," she begged. David threw open the back door, shouting into the dark, "Leave us alone!" But the yard was empty, the music fading like a cruel joke. The police arrived at dawn, 2 officers with tired eyes and skeptical frowns. They inspected the yard, finding no boot print or speaker. The source of the music remained a mystery. "Could be kids with a Bluetooth speaker," one officer said, scribbling in his notepad. His partner, younger and less jaded, looked uneasy. "Was has had weird reports before," he muttered, glancing at the woods behind the house. They took a statement advising the couple to install motion lights and cameras. Cheryl and David nodded, but the officer's words felt hollow as the patrol car drove away. Cheryl noticed a small, crumpled piece of paper under the porch steps. She picked it up, her hands trembling. It read, "Welcome home," in shaky, unfamiliar handwriting. "David, look at this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He stared at the note, his face drained of color. "That's not from the realtor," he said. They called the police again, but the officer dismissed it as a prank, suggesting they file a report if it happened again. Determined to protect themselves, Cheryl and David drove to a hardware store, buying security cameras and floodlights. They spent the afternoon installing them, their hands clumsy with exhaustion. The cameras covered every angle of the yard, their red lights blinking in the dusk. "If they come back, we'll catch them," David said, trying to sound confident. Cheryl nodded, but her gut told her this wasn't over. That night they sat in the living room, eyes glued to the camera feed on Cheryl's phone. At midnight, "Tiptoe Through the Tulips" started again, softer now, like a whisper carried on the wind. Cheryl's hands shook as she checked the feed. The figure was back, standing on the lawn, closer this time, its head tilted as if listening. David grabbed the bat and stormed outside, shouting, "Get out of here!" The floodlights blazed, but the figure didn't flinch. Cheryl screamed for David to come back, her eyes locked on the screen. Then, the figure turned, walking slowly, toward the woods, its silhouette fading into the trees. The music stopped. David returned, his face ashen. "I couldn't see its face," he said, his voice hollow. "It was just there." They reviewed the camera footage, hearts pounding. The figure appeared as a dark blur, its edges smudged like a glitch in the video. The boot print was back, deeper now, joined by a second one, both leading toward the woods. Cheryl's hands trembled as she zoomed in. "These aren't normal," she whispered. The prints were too wide, too uneven, as if made by someone or something moving unnaturally. David shook his head, refusing to speculate. "We're not staying here," he said, grabbing their keys. They called the police again, but by the time an officer arrived, the rain had washed the prints away. The camera footage showed nothing but static where the figure should have been. "Technical glitch," the officer said, shrugging. "We'll patrol the area." But his words offered no comfort. Cheryl and David packed a bag and drove to a motel, too terrified to spend another night in the house. At the motel, Cheryl couldn't sleep. She kept hearing "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf" in her head, its melody looping like a curse. David sat up all night staring at the door, the bat across his lap. The next morning they returned to the house to collect their belongings, moving quickly, afraid to linger. As they packed, Cheryl found another note, this one taped inside a kitchen cabinet. "You can't leave," it read in the same shaky handwriting. She dropped it, her scream echoing through the house. David grabbed the note, stuffing it into his pocket. "We're done here," he said, his voice breaking. They called a realtor that day, listing the house for sale. The source of the music and the figure remained a mystery, a shadow they couldn't escape. They sold the house at a loss, moving to a new town far from Was, hoping to leave the nightmare behind. The house in Was still stands, its porch creaking in the wind, its windows dark. Locals avoid it, whispering about strange noises in the night. Cheryl and David never found out who or what tormented them. The music, the figure, the mystery lingered, a weight they carried in every quiet moment. They sold the house and never looked back. But sometimes Cheryl wakes up convinced she hears tiptoe through the tulips in the distance, faint but unmistakable. David keeps a bat by the bed just in case, though he knows it's useless against the fear that followed them. What would you do if Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf played outside your window at midnight? Would you confront the figure or run and never return? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced something unexplained? Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more true stories that'll keep you up at night. If you've got a chilling tale, drop it below. We're listening. And maybe, just maybe, you'll think twice the next time you hear an old song in the dark. No one believes I saw a stranger in a locked Alzheimer's ward at 3 a.m., but I'll never forget his grin. A nurse on night shift in an Alzheimer's ward, I'm used to patients' fears blurring with reality. But when Mrs. Lena clutched my arm, her eyes wild with terror, whispering about a smiling man who watches her from the shadows, my blood ran cold. I thought it was just dementia, until the lights flickered, and a chill wrapped around me like a vice. Something's alive. In this ward, something that knows my name. I'm alone, and her terror is now mine. The Alzheimer's ward is a maze of dim corridors, where the hum of flickering fluorescence feels like a heartbeat. At 3 a.m., the silence is oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the old building settling, or so I tell myself. I'm making my rounds, my sneakers squeaking faintly on the linoleum, when I reach Mrs. Lena's room. She's one of my regulars, a frail woman in her 80s whose eyes always seem to search for something just out of reach. Tonight, though, she's different. Her hands clutch the thin hospital blanket, knuckles white, and her gaze darts to the shadowed corners of the room. I try to comfort her, a patient terrified of a smiling man who watches her. Her voice is barely a whisper, cracked and desperate as she describes him. A man with a grin too wide, too still, like it's painted on. He's here, she says, her eyes locking onto mine. He's always here. I force a smile, patting her hand, but my stomach twists. Lena's dementia often spins wild stories, but the raw fear in her voice is new. I've heard patients talk about shadows or lost loved ones, but this smiling man feels different, like a weight pressing on the room. I tell her it's okay that I'm here, but my words sound hollow. The air feels thicker now, as if someone's holding their breath just beyond the door. I glance at the glass window of her room, expecting to see my reflection in the dark. Instead, there's nothing, just an endless black that seems to swallow the light. As I step back into the hall, a faint tap echoes from somewhere down the corridor. I freeze, my flashlight trembling in my hand. It's probably just a pipe. But my pulse quickens. The ward is locked at night, no visitors, no staff except me. I sweep the beam across the empty hallway, illuminating rows of closed doors and sterile walls. Nothing. But the tap comes again, deliberate, like a finger against glass. My skin prickles, and I can't shake the feeling that eyes are on me, watching from the dark. I whisper Lena's name to ground myself, but it only makes the silence louder. Whatever's out there, it's not just her imagination. My heart hammers as I move down the hall, the cold seeping through my scrubs. The ward feels alive, the shadows shifting just beyond my flashlight's reach. I tell myself it's exhaustion, grueling. Night shifts can play tricks on the mind, but every step feels heavier, like I'm wading through fog. I pass Lena's room again, her door slightly ajar, and pause to check on her. She's still awake, staring at the ceiling, muttering about his smile. I don't want to hear it, but I can't look away. Then I hear it. A low, guttural whisper, too faint to make out, coming from the end of the hall. My breath catches. The ward is locked. The other nurse is off shift. I'm alone. I grip my flashlight, tighter, its beam cutting through the dark, and take a step toward the sound. The whisper stops, replaced by another tap, closer now, like someone's testing the glass. My mind races. A patient wandering? A prank? But the ward's silence screams otherwise. I reach the nurse's station, a small oasis of light in the sea of shadows, and check the security monitors. The screens show empty halls, empty rooms, nothing out of place. But as I turn away, the tap comes again, sharp and deliberate, from the glass door behind me. I spin around, my flashlight shaking, and there he is, a man standing outside the room, his smile unnaturally wide. His face is pale, almost translucent, his eyes gleaming like polished glass. His grin stretches beyond human limits, a predator's leer that makes my blood freeze. He doesn't move, doesn't blink, just stares, his presence filling the room like a scream. The lights flicker, plunging the ward into darkness for a split second. When they buzz back on, he's gone. I choke on a gasp, my legs trembling. No. One else is in the ward. It's supposed to be empty. I stumble to the door, my flashlight sweeping wildly, but the hall is empty, the glass reflecting only my pale face. My pulse roars in my ears, drowning out the hum of the lights. I check every room, every corner, my hands shaking so badly I nearly drop the flashlight. Nothing, no footprints, no trace. But as I pass the glass again, a shadow flickers in the corner of my eye, gone when I turn. A low chuckle hums through the air, too close, like it's right behind me. I spin, but the hall is empty. My skin crawls, every nerve screaming to run. Another tap sounds, slower, deliberate, from the direction of Lena's room. I force myself to move, each step a battle against the dread pooling in my gut. I reach her door, my hand hovering over the handle. The tap comes again from inside. I push the door open, expecting to see Lena, but her bed is empty, the blankets crumpled on the floor. My heart stops. She can't walk on her own. Lena, I whisper, my voice barely audible. The room is silent, but the air feels wrong, like it's pressing against me. I step inside, my flashlight catching something in the corner. A faint outline just for a moment of that same grinning face. I blink and it's gone. But the chuckle returns, low and mocking, echoing in my skull. I back out, slamming the door, and run to the nurse's station, my breath ragged. I call my supervisor, but the line is static. The ward feels like a trap, and I'm the prey. I don't tell Lena what happened when I find her back in bed, her eyes still wide with fear. She's terrified, whispering about a smiling man who watches her from the dark, her hands gripping mine as she begs me to stay. I try to soothe her, but my own fear chokes me. I saw him, standing outside her room, his smile unnaturally, wide eyes locked on me. The memory of his grin, too wide, too still, burns in my mind. No one else saw him, and the ward was supposed to be empty. I checked the security footage later, but it's just static, as if he erased himself. My supervisor calls it exhaustion, but her voice wavers. She's seen things here too, I can tell. I'm left questioning if it was real or if my mind betrayed me. Every creak in the ward feels like his footsteps, every shadow his grin. I start noticing patients whispering about a man in the dark, their eyes darting to the same corners Lena feared. One morning I find a journal under Mr. Carter's, its pages filled with frantic sketches of a grinning face. Those same gleaming eyes, that unnatural smile. My hands shake as I flip through, finding a note. He's always here, he never leaves. I show it to my coworker, but she brushes it off, her laugh too sharp. Yet I catch her glancing at the shadows, her face pale. I dig deeper, asking patience. Discreetly. Mr. Carter, who barely speaks, mutters about a smiling man at his door each night, his hands trembling as he traces that grin in the air. Another patient, Mrs. Ellis, draws the same face on her napkin, her eyes distant. The ward feels like a cage, its walls hiding something older than the hospital itself. I check old records, finding a faded file about a patient from the 1970s, a man who died here, known for his eerie smile. The details are scarce, but the coincidence is too much. Was he the one I saw? Or is this something darker, something that feeds on the fear of the vulnerable? I quit a week later, unable to face another night in that ward. But the smiling man doesn't let go. Every night I wake at 3 a.m., my heart pounding, feeling eyes on me in the dark. Sometimes I hear a faint tap against my window, slow and deliberate, like he's following me. I moved to a new city, took a desk job, but the fear clings like damp rot. I keep the journal hidden in a locked drawer. Its sketch is a reminder of what I can't unsee. I've tried to move on, but every shadow feels alive, every silence too loud. Last month, my old coworker called, her voice barely a whisper. "He's back," she said. "The patients are drawing him again." I hung up, my hands shaking, and pulled out the journal. A new sketch was there, one I didn't draw. A grinning face with my name scrawled beneath it in jagged letters. My blood ran cold. I burned the journal that night, watching the pages curl into ash. But I know it won't stop him. He's not just in the ward anymore. He's in my dreams, my reflection, my every waking moment. I don't know what he wants, but I feel his grin, always watching, always waiting. Blackwood Forest loomed like a scar on the edge of town, its pines swallowing light and sound. I'm Ethan, a 29-year-old park ranger with 5 years patrolling these woods in northern Maine. Last June, I was on a routine check, mapping new trails for hikers. The air was heavy, laced with the scent of damp earth and something sour, unnatural. Locals whispered about Blackwood, missing hikers, strange cries at night. But I'd never believed in ghost stories. Until that day. I was a mile in when it hit me. A woman's scream, raw and piercing, cutting through the silence. "Help!" My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a cry, it was a sound that sank into your bones, begging for rescue. I spun around, scanning the trees, my radio crackling uselessly. Another scream, "Help!" I bolted toward it, boots pounding, heart racing. But something was wrong. No matter how fast I ran, that voice never got closer. It echoed at the same distance, looping like a nightmare. Sweat stung my eyes as I stopped, gasping. The forest was watching me. And that scream, it wasn't just a call for help. It was a warning. Blackwood wasn't just a forest. It was a legend. Stretching across miles of Maine's wilderness, it was nicknamed the Widow's Grave, for the hikers who vanished without a trace. 9 in the last 15 years, their faces plastered on faded posters in gas stations. I'd seen those posters, memorized their names, but I never thought I'd be chasing one of their ghosts. My job was to keep people safe, mark trails, scare off poachers. But now a woman's voice screamed, "Help!" every 10 seconds, relentless, pulling me deeper into the woods. I radioed base, but static was all I got. My phone showed no bars, battery at 15%. The sun was sinking, casting long shadows that twisted like fingers. I ran toward the screams, but they never got closer. It was like the forest was bending reality, trapping her voice in a loop. I shouted, "Tell me where you are!" My voice bounced off the trees, but hers didn't. It was everywhere, behind me, above me, inside me. My chest tightened. This wasn't a lost hiker. This was something else. The trail disappeared, swallowed by ferns and thorns. I pushed through, my flashlight flickering. The air grew colder, the sour smell stronger. Then I saw it, a tree with strange carvings, spirals, crosses, symbols that didn't belong in any guidebook. I traced them with my fingers, heart pounding. They were fresh, sap still wet. Someone or something had been here. The screams kept coming. Help! I followed them, tripping over roots, my boots sinking into mud. But no matter how far I went, that voice stayed the same distance away. It was maddening, like chasing a mirage. I reached a clearing and my breath caught. A circle of stones arranged like an altar sat in the center. The ground around it was scorched, as if burned years ago. The screams were louder here, vibrating. In my skull, I ran toward them again, but they didn't get closer. I knelt by the altar, searching for clues. That's when I found it. A locket half buried in the dirt. Inside was a photo of a woman, young, smiling. My hands shook as I pocketed it. Was this her? The screams stopped. The silence was worse, heavy, like the air was pressing down. Then, a new sound, a low chant rising from the trees. It wasn't human, more like a hum that crawled under my skin. I swung my flashlight, but the beam caught only fog. The chant grew louder, words I couldn't make out. Help! The scream returned, closer now, but still unreachable. I yelled, I'm trying! My voice cracked. That's when I saw the footprints, bare, human, circling the altar. They hadn't been there a minute ago. Time blurred. The forest felt alive, trees shifting when I wasn't looking. My flashlight died, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, the screen flickering. It showed a photo I hadn't taken. The woman from the locket, her face pale, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream. I dropped the phone, my pulse roaring. The screams looped again. Help! I ran, not caring where, just away from that altar. But the forest wouldn't let me go. The chant followed, louder, and now there were whispers, faint, overlapping, like a crowd watching me. I tripped, falling, into a ditch. My hands landed on something soft, fabric, a jacket torn and stained. I held it up, my stomach churning. It was a woman's, small, with dried blood on the collar. The screams were deafening now, still no closer, but they felt like they were inside me. I clutched the locket, the jacket, my mind racing. Who was she? What happened here, and why was I the one hearing her? The screams, that endless help, were no longer just sound. They were alive, pulsing in my veins, pulling me back to the altar. I clutched the locket, the jacket, my hands trembling. The forest was closing in, the fog so thick I could barely see my own feet. My phone was gone, my flashlight dead. I was alone, guided only by that voice, still no closer, taunting me from the darkness. I stumbled back to the clearing, the altar looming like a gravestone. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow and heavy, circling me. Not human, but something ancient. Dragging through the earth, I whispered, "Leave me alone." The footsteps stopped, but the chant returned, louder. A chorus of voices in a tongue older than the forest itself. I sank to my knees, the locket burning in my hand. Help! The scream came again, now from the altar itself. I crawled toward, my fingers brushing the scorched stones. That's when I saw her, not in the fog, but in my mind. A woman, young, her face matching the locket's photo, her eyes pleading, her mouth frozen in that cry. "You can't save me," she whispered. Her voice clear, not a scream. I froze, tears streaming down my face. "Who are you?" I choked out. No answer, just the chant, now deafening, shaking the ground. The air grew hot, the sour smell choking me. I ran, the forest twisting around me, branches snapping like bones. I don't know how I found the trail, but I did, sprinting until I collapsed by my truck, gasping, the locket still in my fist. I drove to town, shaking, and burst into a diner. The waitress took one look at me and paled. I showed her the locket, told her about the screams, how they never got closer. She sat me down, her voice low. They found a body out there 2 years ago. A woman murdered, left in those woods. I froze. She said her name was Sarah, a hiker, her case unsolved. Folks said her spirit was trapped, crying help, stuck in an endless plea no one could answer. I left Blackwood behind, quit my job, moved to a city far from any forest. But I kept the locket. I couldn't let it go. That voice, her help, haunts me faint at night like she's still out there. I've searched for answers, police files, old stories, but Blackwood buries its truths. The locket sits on my nightstand, a reminder of the woman I couldn't save. And deep down, I'm terrified. What if she's not alone? What if Blackwood is still calling, waiting for me to return? The blizzard screamed through the Vermont wilderness, a relentless beast that buried the world in white. It was February, the kind of cold that gnawed at your soul, turning every shadow into a threat. Jenny and I, chasing a weekend of snowboarding and quiet moments, thought we'd found sanctuary in her family's cabin. Back before my girlfriend Jenny and I officially started dating, we would still hang out all the time. We both snowboard, and her family has a little cabin-type house in Vermont, not far from Stowe Mountain Resort. A rustic escape, frozen in time. But that first night, as the storm raged, a single sound shattered our illusion of safety. A heavy, deliberate knock at 2 a.m. My heart stopped. Jenny's eyes widened, her breath catching. Who could be out there, miles from civilization, in a storm that swallowed all traces of life? And why did it feel like they'd been waiting for us, watching from the darkness? The cabin was a relic, its warped wooden walls groaning under the storm's assault. The house had just about everything: heat, electricity, except running water. Her family had jugs and jugs of water for important things like washing hands and plates and stuff. But there was no working toilet, so she told me we had to use the house outside. No Wi-Fi, no neighbors, just us. A flickering fireplace and an outhouse 50 feet away, shrouded in snow. That first evening we tried to make it ours, cooking pasta on a camp stove, our laughter echoing over the storm's howl. But the cabin fought back. The windows rattled, sharp and insistent like warnings carved in glass. Jenny's smile faltered, her gaze lingering on the bolted door. "You hear that?" she whispered, her voice tight. I strained my ears, catching a faint crunch outside, like footsteps, deliberate and close. I told myself it was the storm, but my pulse quickened. Something was out there, circling in the white void, and it wasn't the wind. Midnight came, the storm now a feral scream tearing at the pines. I bundled up, cursing the trek to the outhouse, the cold slicing through my jacket. I ran out into the snowstorm and the house once more. This time I slammed the door shut to prevent snow and cold air blowing in my face. I heard the blasting music. From inside the house still, but then no, over that I heard the crunching sound of footsie. While I used the outhouse, a stranger approached the locked cabin. Jenny was alone. The door bolted as I'd insisted. She told me later it began with a knock, slow, heavy like a heartbeat in the dark. Her hands shook as she cut the music, plunging the cabin into silence. The girlfriend hid in fear as the figure stared inside, his silhouette looming through the frosted glass, breath fogging in deliberate clouds. She crawled behind the couch, clutching a knife, her pulse a deafening roar. He didn't leave. His boots crunched around the cabin, testing each window. his fingers scraping the frames. Then a whistle. Low, chilling, like a predator toying with its prey. I sprinted back, my flashlight carving a weak path through the blizzard, heart pounding like a war drum. The door was locked, but Jenny's face was a mask of terror, her voice a whisper as she recounted the man's shadow, his chilling stare. Jenny told me about the secret cellar in the floor, that her dad kept a couple rifles and shotgun in navigating in the dark. I found the hand saint. We tore open the floorboards, every creak of the cabin a scream in itself. Then a new sound. 3 sharp taps, not from the windows but the roof. Something was up there, pacing, scraping. My blood ran cold. Was he climbing, searching for a way in? Jenny gripped the shotgun, her hands trembling. "He's not human," she whispered, eyes wild. Outside, the whistle returned, louder, closer, slicing through the storm. We barricaded the door, but the cabin felt like a trap, its walls closing in. Dawn broke, gray and merciless, the storm still clawing at the world. I came to the door only a couple minutes after this happened, and found Jenny curled in the corner, the shotgun still in her lap. We didn't speak. We packed in silence, the cabin's walls watching us like silent witnesses. We fled the next day, piling into the car, the snow swallowing the cabin's outline as we drove. Every creak of the windshield wipers felt like a countdown. We didn't look back, but I felt it. A weight, like eyes boring into us from the trees. The radio crackled, spitting static. Then a faint hum, almost like that whistle. Jenny's hand gripped mine, her knuckles white. We didn't stop until we hit the highway, the cabin a fading nightmare. But it wasn't over, not really. We never returned to that cabin. We got the hell out of there the next day. At least we got our full day of snowboarding. In that horrific night was definitely an experience, to say the least. We never learned who it was, and the mystery festers like a wound. Was he a drifter, lost in the storm, or something worse? A predator who'd tracked us from the moment we arrived. Months later, Jenny's dad called, his voice hollow. He'd found a glove, leather cracked and stained with something dark, wedged beneath the outhouse steps. It wasn't ours. Worse, carved into the cabin's back door was a symbol, a jagged circle slashed through like a claim. Locals whispered of a recluse in those woods, a man who marked his territory and vanished into the snow. The police found nothing, no glove, no symbol, no answers. Now, when the wind howls, I hear that whistle, sharp and cruel, and I see Jenny's face, pale and haunted. What did he want? And is he still out there, waiting for the next soul to step into his storm? Weeks after we fled, the cabin haunted us in ways we couldn't explain. Jenny stopped snowboarding, her spark dimmed, her nights plagued by dreams of a shadow at the window. I wasn't much better. Every gust of wind sent me checking the locks, my flashlight sweeping the yard. We tried to move on, but the questions gnawed at us. Why us? Why that night? I dug into the cabin's history, hoping for answers. Old records mentioned a fire in the 1970s, a man who'd lived there alone, shunned by the town. He'd vanished after the blaze, his name erased. But locals still spoke of the Watcher, a figure seen in the woods, always at the edge of sight. Was he real or just a story to scare kids? The glove, the symbol, they weren't myths. They were proof something had been there, something that saw us as prey. One night I found Jenny staring at a photo from that weekend, her finger tracing the cabin's outline. "Look," she whispered, pointing to the background. Behind the trees, barely visible, was a shape, too tall, too still to be a shadow. My stomach twisted. Had he been there all along, blending into the storm? I burned the photo, but it didn't help. The cabin's grip tightened. Last month, a hiker went missing near Stowe, his car found abandoned. A crude circle scratched into the hood. The news called it a coincidence, but I knew better. He's still out there, marking his territory, waiting, and I can't shake the feeling that he hasn't forgotten us. Jenny set up a fire and got the heat on full blast, and started blasting some music we started to drink. And eventually I had to break the seal and pee. But also, if I was throwing my boots on anyway, I figured I'd do all my business in the OS. That moment of normalcy, laughing over cheap beer, feels like a lifetime ago. When she saw the person at the door wasn't me, she cut the power and hid in a corner in the living room, and watched in horror as a stranger walked past the living room window, slowly looking inside. That image, Jenny, alone, paralyzed, burns in my mind. It wasn't just a scare. It was a violation, a crack in our world that never healed. We tried to reclaim that weekend. At least we got our full day of snowboarding in. But the cabin's shadow lingers, a reminder that some doors, once opened, never close. I caught a glimpse of him in the moonlight, a dark silhouette standing at the edge of my cornfield, staring straight at me. My family's farm was supposed to be a quiet refuge, but that night, it felt like a hunting ground. My dogs were losing, their minds barking so fiercely I thought they'd tear through their chains. I gripped my shotgun, heart slamming against my ribs. This wasn't a raccoon or a deer, this was a man, and he was on my land, uninvited. One wrong move, and this could end badly, for him or for me. My name's Caleb, a 28-year-old welder who doubles as the caretaker of our family's 60-acre farm in rural Indiana. My parents were away for the week, leaving me to handle the chores, feeding the livestock, checking the crops, keeping the place running. It's a small operation, just corn and a few cows, with a weathered farmhouse that stood for a century. That first night, a muggy July evening, I was in the barn, fixing a tractor part, when the dogs barked, their howls cutting through the quiet like a siren. I stepped outside, wiping sweat from my brow, and saw them, Duke and Molly, straining toward the cornfield, eyes locked on something I couldn't yet see. I grabbed my flashlight and shotgun, a habit from years of dealing with coyotes. I saw someone lurking in the cornfield at night, maybe 30 yards out, a shadow among the stalks. "Hey, get off my land!" I shouted, my voice sharp but unsteady. The figure didn't move, just stood there, faceless in the dark. The dogs barked, their frenzy shaking me to my core. I raised the shotgun and fired a warning shot into the sky, the blast echoing across the fields. The silhouette flinched, then darted into the corn, stalks rustling as he fled. He eventually vanished, swallowed by the rouse. I stood frozen, flashlight sweeping the field, but there was nothing, just silence and the dog's low growls. Was it a kid pulling a stunt? My gut said no. The next morning, I walked the field, looking for signs. I found footprints, big, uneven, pressed deep into the dirt. They led into the corn but stopped abruptly, like the guy had vanished mid-step. I called my younger brother Nate, who was staying in town, and told him to keep an eye out. He laughed it off, saying it was probably teens messing around. I believed it was a prank but never confirmed. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. That night, I kept the dogs closer, their collars clipped to the porch. Around 11 p.m., the dogs barked again, louder, angrier, their eyes fixed on the same damn field. I grabbed the shotgun, my hands slick with sweat, and stepped into the yard. The air was thick, the stars dim behind a haze. I swept my flashlight across the corn, its beam catching the tops of the stalks. Then a sound, a low, guttural hum, like someone muttering under their breath, coming from deep within the field. My skin prickled. "Show yourself," I yelled, voice cracking. The hum stopped, but the dog's barks grew feral. I moved closer, the corn towering over me, its leaves brushing my arms. I saw someone lurking in the cornfield at night, closer this time, maybe 20 feet away, standing still as a statue. "Last chance!" I shouted, raising the gun. I fired a warning shot, the blast ringing in my ears. The figure bolted, crashing, through the stalks and eventually vanished into the dark. I didn't chase him. Only a fool would run blind into that maze. The dogs strained to follow, but I dragged them back to the house, locking every door. By the third night, I was running on fumes, my eyes gritty from lack of sleep. I'd called the county sheriff, but they were no help. No damage, no crime. The deputy said, suggesting it was just kids. I wasn't buying it. Those footprints didn't belong to some teenager. They were deliberate, heavy. I set up a motion sensor light by the barn, hoping it'd scare off any trespassers. That evening, I sat on the porch, shotgun across my lap, listening to the night. The dogs were quiet, but the air felt wrong, heavy with a tension I couldn't name. Around 1 a.m., the dogs barked, their howls exploding like a warning bell. I jumped up, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other, and ran to the field's edge. The motion light flicked on, bathing the yard in a harsh white glow. There he was, someone, lurking in the cornfield at night, bold as hell, standing just beyond the light's reach. His silhouette was sharper now, tall and lean, but his face stayed hidden. "Get out!" I screamed, my voice raw. He turned, staring straight at me, and my blood turned to ice. The dogs barked, their snarls shaking the air. I didn't hesitate. I fired a warning shot, the blast splitting the night. He ran, stalks snapping as he eventually vanished into the corn. I fired another shot into the air, shouting, "Don't! Come back!" The dogs lunged, but I held them tight. No way was I stepping into that field. I retreated to the house, heart pounding, and barred the door. What did he want? Why my farm? The next day I scoured the field again, finding more footprints. Same size, same pattern, but now with something else. A cigarette butt half buried near the barn. It wasn't mine. I bagged it and called the sheriff again, but they brushed it off. No prints, no leads. I checked local news, finding reports of petty thefts on nearby farms, missing tools, slashed tires. Nothing linked to my place, but it was too close for comfort. I believed it was a prank, but never confirmed. I told Nate what happened, downplaying it to keep him calm. But I was rattled. The farm didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a target, exposed under the open sky. Weeks later, I found something that stopped me cold. A scrap of cloth, torn and dirty, caught on a cornstalk where the footprints ended. It wasn't from my clothes, and it smelled faintly of motor oil. I turned it over to the sheriff, but they had nothing to go on. The dogs still get antsy some nights, staring at the field like they sense him out there. I keep the shotgun loaded, the motion light on, and my eyes on the corn. I believed it was a prank, but never confirmed. But that hum, those footprints, that cloth, they tell me he wasn't just passing through. If you've got a place to protect, trust your dogs. Some intruders don't come to steal. They come to watch, to wait, and to haunt. The clock ticks past 2 a.m., and the fluorescent lights hum in an empty grocery store. Jake, a 22-year-old night shift worker, sweeps the floor, the only sound his sneakers squeaking on the tiles. Then a faint shuffle, like footsteps, echoes. From aisle 7. His heart skips. The store's been dead for hours. No one's supposed to be here. He peers down the aisle, his flashlight trembling. A shadow darts past, too quick to catch. Jake's breath catches. He's alone. Or is he? A strange man is roaming the store, lurking just out of sight. Is this a thief? A prank? Or something worse? One wrong move could trap him with a stranger. The dark. Would you check the aisles or run for the door? This is the night Jake's routine shift turned into a nightmare he'll never forget. Jake's been working nights at Harper's Market for 3 months, picking up shifts to pay for college. The store, a small 24-hour spot in a quiet Ohio town, is usually uneventful, just restocking shelves and dodging the occasional drunk customer. But tonight feels off. The air's too still, the silence too heavy. Jake shakes it off, blaming his late-night coffee jitters. He grabs a broom, trying to focus, but the shuffle he heard lingers in his mind. "Just the AC," he mutters, but his eyes keep darting to the aisles. He checks the front door, locked as always. The back door, where deliveries come, is secured with a heavy bolt. No one could get in. Still, he can't shake the feeling he's being watched. He heads to the manager's office, a cramped room with grainy security monitors. The screens show empty aisles, flickering slightly under the fluorescent glow. Jake squints, noticing something odd. Aisle 5's camera feed is blurry, like someone smeared the lens. He rewinds the footage, but it's just static where the last hour should be. His stomach twists. "Come on, not now," he says, smacking the monitor. Then another sound, a soft clatter, like a can hitting the floor. It's coming from aisle 3, canned goods. Jake grabs his flashlight and a walkie-talkie, though his coworker Mike won't be in until 5 a.m. He steps out, his pulse racing, and calls out, "Hello? Store's closed." No answer. The silence is worse than a reply. Jake creeps toward aisle 3, his flashlight beam slicing through the dark corners. A single can of soup lies on the floor, its label torn, as if someone knocked it over and left it. He picks it up, his hands clammy. That's when he sees it. A shadow moving at the end of aisle 4, quick and deliberate. The strange man is roaming the store, his silhouette lean and hunched, slipping out of sight. Jake's heart pounds. He backs away, his sneakers squeaking louder now. "Hey, you can't be in here," he shouts, his voice cracking. The shadow pauses, then moves again, dodging the cameras with eerie precision, as if he knows where they're pointed. Jake's mind races. Thief? Homeless guy? Worse? He retreats to the office, locking the door, and grabs his phone. His fingers hover over 911, but he hesitates. What if it's nothing? He doesn't want to look paranoid. The walkie-talkie crackles, startling him. It's just static, but it feels like a warning. Jake checks the monitors again. The man is in aisle 6 now, his back to the camera, motionless. He's tall, wearing a dark hoodie, his face hidden. Jake zooms in, but the feed glitches, the man's outline blurring. Then the man turns, slipping out of sight as if he sensed the camera. Jake's breath hitches. This isn't random. Whoever this guy is, he's playing a game, staying one step ahead. Jake tries the walkie-talkie, hoping Mike's early, but gets only static. He dials his boss, Sarah, leaving a shaky voicemail. "There's someone in the store. I don't know how he got in." No response. The store feels like a maze now. Every aisle a trap. Jake knows he can't stay locked in the office forever. He has to act. Jake takes a deep breath and steps out, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. The store is silent again, but it's a predatory silence, like something's waiting. He moves toward aisle 6 where he last saw the man, his footsteps painfully loud. The shelves loom like walls, casting long shadows. He passes aisle 5, noticing a stack of cereal boxes toppled over as if someone brushed past in a hurry. "This is crazy," Jake whispers, his voice barely audible. He reaches aisle 6, shining his light down the empty row. Nothing. Then, a faint creak from the back of the store near the stockroom. Jake freezes. The back door, he'd checked it, but what if he missed something? He heads that way, his heart in his throat, passing the dairy aisle. That's when he sees him. The strange man is there, roaming the store, standing at the far end of aisle 8, staring directly at Jake. Jake's legs nearly give out. The man's face is still hidden, but his eyes glint under the hoodie, unblinking. He doesn't move, just watches, his posture unnaturally stiff. Jake's voice cracks as he yells, "Get out, or I'm calling the cops." The man tilts his head like a predator sizing up prey, then steps back, slipping out of sight behind a display. Jake sprints to the office, slamming the door and locking it. His hands shake as he dials 911, his words tumbling out. "There's a guy in Harper's Market. He's hiding, avoiding cameras. I'm alone, please hurry." The dispatcher's calm voice tells him to stay put, that a patrol car is 10 minutes out. 10 minutes feels like a lifetime. Jake watches the monitors, his chest tight. The man is gone from aisle 8, but the stockroom camera is dark, completely blacked out. Every sound makes Jake jump. A hum from the freezers, a drip from a leaky pipe. He checks the office door, making sure it's secure, and grabs a box cutter. From the desk, its small blade a pitiful defense. The monitors flicker and he spots the man again, now in aisle 2, near the registers. He's moving slowly, deliberately, dodging the cameras with that same eerie precision. Jake's mind races with worst-case scenarios, robbery, assault, or something he can't even name. He thinks of his mom, who begged him to quit this job, and his girlfriend Emma, who's probably asleep, unaware he's trapped. The walkie-talkie crackles again, this time with a low, garbled sound like a voice distorted by static. Jake drops it, his hands trembling. "This isn't happening," he mutters. But the man's presence feels heavier now, like the air itself is watching. Headlights flash outside, and Jake's heart leaps. A police cruiser pulls into the lot. He unlocks the office door, waving frantically as 2 officers step inside, their hands on their holsters. "He's in here somewhere," Jake says, pointing to the monitors. The officers, a grizzled veteran named Officer Daniels and a younger one, Officer Lee, nod and draw their flashlights. Jake leads them to aisle 2, but it's empty. They check aisle 8, the stockroom, even the bathrooms. Nothing. Jake's stomach sinks. "He was right there," he insists, showing them the blurry footage. Daniels frowns, unconvinced, but Lee notices something. A smudged handprint on the back door's handle. "This door was locked, right?" Lee asks. Jake nods, but doubt creeps in. Had he missed something? The officers split up, combing the store. Jake stays by the registers, clutching the box cutter, his eyes darting between aisles. Then a shout from the stockroom. "Got him!" Lee calls. Jake rushes over, his legs shaky. The police have caught the suspect pinned against a stack of crates. The man is in his 30s, gaunt, with stringy hair and wild eyes, still wearing the dark hoodie. He's silent, offering no resistance as Daniels cuffs him. Jake's relief is short-lived. The man's gaze locks onto him, unblinking, sending a chill down his spine. "How'd he get in?" Jake asks, his voice hoarse. The officers check the back door, no signs of forced entry. The cameras show nothing but static during the man's movements. No one knows how he got inside or why he was there. Daniel shrugs. Could be drugs, could be a drifter. We'll figure it out. The police haul the man to the cruiser, his head bowed. Jake gives a statement, his voice shaking as he recounts the night. The officers promise to follow up, but their tone suggests this is just another call. As they drive away, Jake locks the store, his hands unsteady. He checks the cameras one last time. Still glitchy, still useless. Sarah, his boss, arrives at 4 a.m., apologetic but clueless. "You okay?" she asks. Jake nods, but he's not. He quits the next day, unable to face another shift. The store feels different now, like it's hiding something. Weeks later, he hears the man was released. No charges, no explanation. No one knows why he was there, and Jake can't shake the feeling he's still being watched. Every creak in his apartment, every shadow brings back that night. Harper's Market is still open, its lights buzzing through the night. Jake's gone, but the story lingers, whispered by new employees who feel eyes on them during late shifts. The strange man, the mystery of how he got in, haunts the store like a ghost. Jake avoids driving past it, but sometimes he dreams of aisle 8, the man's glinting eyes staring back. What would you do, alone in a store with a stranger lurking in the dark? Would you confront him or lock yourself away? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt watched when you were alone? Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for more true stories that'll make your skin crawl. If you've got a creepy tale, drop it below. We're listening. And next time you're in a quiet store, check the aisles, you might not be alone. We thought it was just a game until the abandoned church answered back. 3 friends, we played with a Ouija board in an abandoned church, seeking a cheap thrill on a cold October night. Ryan, Mia, and I, Ethan, wanted to test the rumors about the old church on Deadman's Road. But when the air turned heavy and the shadows seemed to breathe, our laughter died. A single knock echoed from the darkness, chilling us to the bone. We should have left then, but we didn't. What answered our questions wasn't human, and it's followed us ever since. The abandoned church on Deadman's Road had been a local legend for years, a crumbling relic at the end of a dirt path, shrouded by gnarled oaks and whispers of hauntings. Ryan, Mia, and I had grown up hearing stories about it. Disappearances, strange lights, voices in the night. At 20, we were too old for ghost stories, but too young to resist the pull of a dare. It was Mia's idea to bring the Ouija board, a battered thing she'd found at a thrift store. "Let's see if the rumors are true," she said, her eyes gleaming with mischief. Ryan, always the skeptic, rolled his eyes but agreed. I was on the fence, my gut uneasy, but I didn't want to be the one to back out. We drove out on a Friday night, the October air sharp and biting. The church loomed ahead, its steeple sagging like a broken spine, windows boarded up, and walls stained with decades of neglect. The gravel crunched under our boots as we approached, our breath fogging in the chill. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of mold and rotting wood. Pews lay overturned, hymnals scattered like fallen leaves. The altar at the far end was draped in cobwebs, a cracked cross hanging crookedly above it. My flashlight beam danced across the walls, catching faded stains that might have been water, or something worse. Ryan set up the Ouija board on a dusty pew, his hands steady despite the dark. Mia lit 3 candles, their flames flickering in the drafty air, casting long shadows that seemed to writhe. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the planchette. "This is stupid," I muttered, but my voice sounded thin, swallowed by the church's oppressive silence. Mia smirked, her dark hair falling over her eyes. "Scared, Ethan?" she teased. I shook my head, but my heart was already pounding. We sat around the Ouija board, our fingers lightly touching the planchette, the candles our only light. The rules were simple. Ask questions, wait for answers, don't let go. Ryan went first, his voice mocking. "Is anyone here?" The planchette didn't move. I felt a flicker of relief, but it was short-lived. The air grew heavier, like a storm was brewing inside the church. Mia tried next, her tone softer. "Who's with us?" Still nothing. I was about to pull my hands away when a faint creak echoed from the altar, like a footstep on the warped floorboards. We froze, our eyes darting to the darkness beyond the candles. "Probably just the wind," Ryan said, but his voice cracked. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. The candles flickered, their flames bending as if someone had exhaled nearby. My skin prickled, a cold sweat forming on my neck. "Ask again," Mia whispered, her fingers trembling on the planchette. I didn't want to, but I couldn't back down now. "Who's here?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The planchette twitched, a slight jerk that made my stomach lurch. We stared at it, waiting, but it stayed still. Then from the altar came a single, sharp knock. We heard knocks, chilling us to the bone. My heart slammed against my ribs, the sound echoing in the empty church. "That's not funny," Mia hissed, her eyes wide. Ryan shook his head, his face pale. "It wasn't me." Another knock, louder, from the same direction. I swung my flashlight toward the altar, its beam cutting through the dark, but nothing was there. Just the cobwebs and the crooked cross. The air felt charged, like static before a lightning strike. "We should go," I said, my voice shaking, but Mia gripped the planchette tighter. "One more question," she insisted. Against my better judgment, we stayed. The knocks came again, 3 in quick succession, each one heavier like a fist against wood. My flashlight trembled in my hand, its beam jittering across the altar. "Who's doing that?" Ryan demanded, his voice sharp but thin. No one answered, but the silence was worse, thick, suffocating, like the church was holding its breath. Mia's eyes were locked on the Ouija board, her fingers white on the planchette. "Ask it something else," she whispered. I shook my head, my gut screaming to leave, but Ryan leaned in, his jaw set. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone defiant. The planchette lurched, dragging our fingers across the board. My heart stopped as it spelled out, letter by letter, STAY. We stared at each other, our breaths shallow. "This isn't funny," I said, but no one was laughing. The candles flickered wildly, their flames nearly snuffing out. A low hum filled the air, not a sound but a vibration, like the church itself was waking up. I yanked my hands back, breaking the circle. "We're done," I said, standing up. But Mia grabbed my wrist, her nails digging in. "We can't stop now," she said, her voice frantic. "It's angry." Before I could argue, another knock boomed from the altar, so loud it rattled the pews. My flashlight beam swung wildly, catching nothing but dust motes swirling in the air. The temperature plummeted, my breath fogging in front of me. "Guys, we need to go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Ryan nodded, his skepticism gone, but Mia was still glued to the board, her eyes glassy. "One more," she murmured, and before we could stop her, she asked, "Who are you?" The planchette flew across the board, spelling out a name we couldn't pronounce. A jumble of letters that felt wrong in my head. The candles went out, plunging us into darkness. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I fumbled for my flashlight, clicking it on, but the beam was weak, barely cutting through the black. Then, from the altar, came a scraping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I swung the light toward it, my hands shaking, and for a split second, I saw it. A shadow, taller than any man, its edges blurring into the dark. Its head turned, and I swear I saw the glint of a smile. Something landed on the Ouija board with a thud, a small, jagged stone, still warm to the touch. We screamed, our voices echoing in the church. The board tipped over, the planchette skittering. Across the floor, I grabbed Mia's arm, pulling her to her feet. "Run!" I shouted, and we bolted for the door, Ryan right behind us. The air felt alive, pressing against us like hands trying to hold us back. The scraping sound followed, faster now, closer. I didn't look back, couldn't look back, my mind screaming that if I did, I'd see that smile. We burst through the church doors, the cold night air hitting us like a slap. We ran to the car, our breaths ragged and piled inside. Ryan slammed the gas, the tires spinning on the gravel as we sped away. My heart was still racing, my hands trembling as I clutched the stone, its edges biting into my palm. None of us spoke, the silence heavy with what we'd seen. The church shrank in the rearview mirror, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still with us, clinging to the dark. We didn't talk about that night for weeks, each of us trying to bury it. We fled after a terrifying encounter, unsure if it was paranormal or not. The stone sat on my desk, a constant reminder of what happened. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, but every time I touched it, my skin crawled, like it carried a piece of the church. Ryan pretended it was a prank, some local kids messing with us, but his eyes told a different story. Haunted like he saw more than he'd admit. Mia was worse. She stopped sleeping, her face gaunt, her hands always shaking. "I dream about it," she whispered once, her voice barely audible. "That smile, it's still here." I tried to move on, to convince myself it was just adrenaline and shadows, but the church wouldn't let go. I started noticing things. Faint knocks on my window at night. Always 3, just like in the church. My flashlight, the one I used, that night would turn on by itself, its beam pointing to the corner of my room where nothing stood. I checked the Ouija board, still in Mia's car, and found scratches on its surface, deep and jagged, like something had clawed it. I didn't tell the others, didn't want to scare them more, but the truth was sinking in. We'd brought something back. One night I drove back to Dead Man's Road alone. I don't know why. Maybe I needed answers. Maybe I needed to prove. It wasn't real. The church looked the same, its walls sagging under the weight of time. I stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the dark, and felt the air shift, heavy and alive. The pews were still overturned. The altar still draped in cobwebs, but something was different. The Ouija board was there, on the same pew, though we'd left it in Mia's car. My heart stopped. I hadn't brought it, hadn't told anyone I was coming. I approached, my hands shaking, and saw the planchette moving on its own, spelling out my name. I stumbled back, my flashlight flickering, and heard a low chuckle, the same one from that night. The candles we'd used were there too, unlit but arranged in a circle around the board. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut, the sound echoing, like a gunshot. My breath caught, my mind screaming to get out. I forced the door open, the wood splintering under my weight, and ran to my car, the chuckle following me into the night. I didn't tell Ryan or Mia about that night, but they knew something was wrong. Ryan started seeing shadows in his apartment, always in the corner of his eye, always gone when he turned. Mia's dreams got worse, her sketches filling with that same blurred face, its smile too wide. I dug into the church's history, desperate for answers. Old records mentioned a groundskeeper who died there in the 1950s, a man locals feared for his eerie grin. The details were vague, but one line stuck with me. He never left. My blood ran cold. Was he the one we'd called? Or had we woken something worse, something tied to the church's bones? We burned the Ouija board in a field, watching the flames devour it, but it didn't help. The knocks followed us, the shadows grew bolder. Mia moved away, but she still calls sometimes, her voice trembling, saying she sees him in her mirrors. Ryan won't talk about it, but I see the fear in his eyes. I keep the stone locked in a box, but I hear it sometimes, tapping against the wood like it's alive. Every night I check my windows, my doors, my shadows, waiting for that smile to appear. Last week I got a package with no return address. Inside was a single photo of the church taken at night. In the window, barely visible, was a face, blurred but unmistakable, with a grin that made my heart stop. On the back, in jagged handwriting, was one word: stay. I burned the photo, but I know it's not over. Whatever we called that night, it's still here, watching, waiting, and I'm afraid we'll never escape. The gas station's neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat, bathing the empty lot in a sickly green glow. It was 2 a.m. on Highway 17, a desolate stretch of Ohio asphalt where the only visitors were shadows and the occasional stray dog. Behind the counter, the fluorescents buzzed. The coffee burned bitter, and the silence pressed against the walls like a living thing. Most nights, it was just boredom and the hum of the cooler. But tonight, something shifted. A regular customer stepped through the door, his coat stained, his eyes too bright. He'd been acting strange lately, muttering things that sent chills down the spine. "They're watching," he whispered, staring at the ceiling as if it held secrets. The air grew heavy, the radio spitting static. His words turned darker, hinting at something he'd done, something wrong. A knot formed in the gut, a warning that this wasn't just another shift. By 3 a.m., the truth would be clear. Whatever walked into that station wasn't leaving without a fight. Highway 17 was a stretch of asphalt that felt like it led nowhere, flanked by cornfields and abandoned barns. The gas station was a relic, rusted. Pumps, a flickering open 24/7 sign, and a single security camera that hadn't worked in years. I'd spent countless nights here, restocking chips, mopping floors, and trying not to think about how alone I was. But Ray changed that. He'd been coming in for months, always around 2 a.m., always buying a tall boy and leaving without a word. At first, he seemed harmless, just another loner. But lately, he'd started acting strange, lingering longer, his hands twitching, muttering things that made no sense. "The government's watching," he'd say, or, "They know what I did." I'd nod, keep my distance, and pray he'd leave. That night, the air felt wrong. The radio was static, the fluorescents buzzed louder, and the lot outside was too quiet. No crickets, no cars. Ray came in at 2:15, his coat stained, his hair greasy. He didn't head for the cooler. Instead, he leaned on the counter, his eyes locked on me, whispering, "They're coming for me." My stomach dropped. "Who's coming, man?" I asked, forcing a smile. He laughed, a sharp, jagged sound that made me flinch. "You'll see," he said, tapping the counter. I glanced at the phone under the register. No signal. The clock crawled to 2:45 and Ray was still there, pacing, muttering about something he'd done. Something bad. I tried to stay calm, restocking cigarettes, but my hands shook. The air grew heavy, like a storm was brewing inside the station. I caught Ray staring at the ceiling again, whispering, "They're here." I followed his gaze. Nothing but cracked tiles and a dead moth in the light. "Ray, you okay?" I asked. He froze, his head snapping toward me. "Xbox," he hissed. "I did something really bad, Caleb." My name on his lips felt like a threat. I backed up, my hip brushing the panic button under the counter. It was broken like everything else here. The clock hit 3 a.m., and the world shifted. The radio. Cut to static, then a low hum like a voice trying to break through. Ray stopped pacing, his face blank. I grabbed a broom, holding it like a weapon. "Ray, maybe you should go," I said, my voice thin. He smiled, a wide, wrong smile that didn't reach his eyes. He started talking again, his voice low, about hiding, about needing a place to stay. I shook my head, my pulse hammering. "Store's closing soon," I lied. That's when I saw it, a glint in his hand. A knife, small but sharp, tucked against his sleeve. My mouth went dry. I edged toward the back door, keeping the counter between us. The hum from the radio grew louder, words forming, gibberish, but it sounded like a chant. Ray's eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. "I need somewhere to hide," he said, stepping closer. My heart pounded so loud I thought he'd hear it. I fumbled for the door handle, my eyes on that knife. The station felt smaller, the walls closing in. I'd always thought the worst part of this job was the boredom. I was wrong. The worst part was realizing I might not make it to sunrise. The hum from the radio was deafening now, a chorus of whispers that didn't sound human. Ray stood frozen, the knife glinting in his hand. My fingers grazed the back door handle, but I didn't dare turn away. He lunged at me, screaming, "I'm gonna kill you!" His voice wasn't his anymore. It was deeper, jagged, like something else was speaking through him. I ducked, the knife slicing the air above my head. I shoved the broom at him, catching his chest, and bolted for the door. My hands shook as I pushed through, stumbling into the lot, my breath ragged. The cold bit my skin, but I didn't stop. I sprinted to the edge of the lot, hiding behind a dumpster, my heart pounding. I fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. I told the operator what happened, my voice breaking, and stayed on the line until I saw headlights. AI, police cruiser pulling in. The station was silent now, the neon sign flickering like a dying pulse. I waved the officer over, my legs barely holding me up. We went inside together, the air thick with that sour clash smell. The radio was off, the counter untouched, but Ray was gone. He'd vanished like he was never there. The officer checked the back, the restroom, even the lot. Nothing. No knife, no footprints, no sign of Ray. I quit the job that week, moved back to my parents' place, and swore I'd never work a graveyard shift again. But Ray's face, those eyes, that smile stays with me. I checked the news, old police reports, anything that might explain who he was. Nothing matched. He'd talked about something bad he'd done, and I can't shake the feeling he was running from more than the law. Sometimes at night I hear that hum from the radio, faint like it's trying to find me. I've driven past Highway 17 since, and the station's still there, empty, the sign dark. Locals say it's cursed, that people like Ray don't just show up, they're drawn there. And deep down I'm terrified he's still out there, waiting, watching, ready to finish what he started. The headlights flickered, then died, plunging the back road into a void of black. It was just past 11 p.m., the kind of late-night delivery shift that made every shadow feel alive. The dead-end street ahead was a blur of twisted trees and rusted signs, barely lit by a dying street lamp. I was on my way to the address, and of course the house was apparently on a dead-end block. This block had a more rural feel to it than the rest of the neighborhood. As the engine sputtered back to life, a shape darted across the road. Too fast. Too human to be an animal. My breath caught, hands gripping the wheel. Was someone out there, watching from the dark? Or was this place already playing tricks on me, luring me toward a house that didn't want to be found? The dead-end block was a forgotten corner of the world, where streetlights flickered and trees loomed like silent sentinels. One of the houses' hay yard was a literal mess, things scattered all over the grass. I even saw a broken, rusty chain link fence just sitting in the middle of the yard. The house at the end stood alone, its sagging porch and cracked windows glowing faintly under my headlights. It looked like a place where hope went setter. Boards peeling, shutters hanging by a nail, and a smell, sharp and sour, seeping through my cracked window. I parked, clutching the pizza bag, my stomach twisting. The order was small, just a sandwich and a slice, but something about this place screamed trouble. As I stepped out, the silence was deafening. No dogs, no crickets, just the faint creak of the house settling. Or was it settling? I swore I heard a floorboard groan inside, like someone was waiting. I approached the back door, my sneakers crunching on broken glass scattered across the porch. I went to the back door and knocked really loud. I looked through the glass of the door and saw nothing except for what looked like a really messy storm room. Clearly, these people were not neat freaks, to say the least. The darkness inside swallowed my flashlight's beam, revealing overturned chairs and papers strewn like confetti. No answer. I knocked again, harder, my breath fogging the glass. Then, from deep within the house, a voice. Low, raspy, like it hadn't been used in years. "I have trouble walking. Could you just bring it in here, please?" I asked. "What room are you in, sir?" And he took a moment to answer back. "If you just walk through the living room, I'm in the dining room there." My gut screamed to run. The voice felt wrong, like it was bait luring me deeper. I gripped the door handle, heart pounding, and noticed a faint smear on the glass. Red, fresh, like blood. I froze, the door handle cold as ice under my fingers. That smear. Was it paint? My mind raced, replaying every horror story I'd heard about delivery drivers vanishing. I thought for a second about my next course of action. I felt bad leaving in the case that this was some old feeble man just living in a messy house. But the house wasn't just messy. It was a graveyard of broken things. And that voice didn't sound feeble. It sounded hungry. I stepped back, scanning the porch, and heard it. A faint shuffle inside, like someone shifting. In the dark, my flashlight caught a shadow, tall and jagged, flickering across the living room wall. It wasn't my reflection. "Hey, you still there?" I called, voice cracking. No answer, just a low creak like a door opening somewhere deep in the house. My legs screamed to bolt, but I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me. Watching from every shattered window, that was it. I wasn't stepping into that house. Started walking through the living room, and there was an open steps away from probably getting robbed that, or someone was trying to play a horrible prank on an unsuspecting pizza delivery guy. My instincts screamed trap, and I trusted them. I backed away, pizza bag still in hand, my eyes locked on the door. The porch groaned under my weight, and then I heard it. A sharp bang from inside, like something heavy hitting the floor. My heart leapt into my throat. I sprinted off, my sneakers slipping on the icy gravel. Every rustle in the bushes a threat. As I fumbled with my keys, a light flickered in an upstairs window. A silhouette, motionless, staring down. I didn't wait to see more. I peeled out, tires screeching, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror. But the weight of those unseen eyes followed me. Back at the pizzeria, I told my boss what happened, my hands still shaking. I went back around front and called one of the guys at the pizzeria to confirm the address. Why, Ori? I steps away from probably getting robbed that, or someone was trying to play a horrible prank on an unsuspecting pizza delivery guy. He shrugged, saying some customers are just weird, but I wasn't convinced. That house wasn't a home, it was a stage, set for something sinister. I couldn't stop picturing that smear, the shadow, the voice that didn't match the silence. Was it a robbery, a prank, or something worse, something I'd escaped by seconds? I started noticing things after that. My rearview mirror catching glimpses of a car following too close. A scratch on my door I didn't remember. The night felt alive, watching, waiting for me to slip up. I quit deliveries a week later, but the fear stuck. A splinter I couldn't pull out. Months later, I saw a news report that stopped me cold. Another driver, from a different shop, had gone missing on that same dead-end block. His car was found, engine running, pizza bag untouched. The house was empty, boarded up, like it had never been lived in. I drove by one night, against my better judgment. The yard was still a mess, but something new caught my eye. A faint carving on the mailbox, a crude triangle with a slash through it. It wasn't there before. Locals whispered about that house, about drivers who'd felt off delivering. There, about lights flickering in windows long after the power was cut. Was it a trap, set over and over? Or something darker, something that fed on fear? I don't deliver anymore, but every time I pass a dead-end street, I hear that voice, raspy and patient, calling me inside. And I wonder, what was waiting in that dining room? When nobody answered the back door either, I went back around front and called one of the guys at the pizzeria to confirm the address. I steps away from probably getting robbed that, or someone was trying to play a horrible prank on an unsuspecting pizza delivery guy. That call saved me, grounding me just long enough to trust my gut. I keep replaying it. The voice, the smear, the shadow that wasn't mine. I told a coworker, and he laughed, saying I dodged a bullet. But bullets don't watch you from upstairs, windows. Bullets don't carve symbols into mailboxes. Whatever was in that house wasn't after pizza. It was after me, and I'm not sure I've outrun it. Some nights my phone buzzes with an unknown number, and I don't answer. I can't.